Climbers vanished on El Capitan. A shocking discovery 3 years later. Benjamin and Miles had climbed together for years. But their attempt on El Capitan ended with both men mysteriously disappearing from the mountain region. Despite massive search efforts combing every trail and crevice, the granite cliffs offered no clues. Only an abandoned campsite, frozen in time. 3 years would pass before a routine walk turned into a nightmare, when a hiker's dog found something shocking under a boulder that no one was prepared to find. The morning fog clung to El Capitan's granite face as Riley Patel adjusted the straps on their backpack. Their German shepherd, Ranger, pulled at the leash, eager to continue down the trail. Riley had hiked this section of Yosemite countless times, but today they were running late for their shift at the visitor center. The main trail would add another 40 minutes. All right, boy. We're taking the shortcut, Riley said, unclipping Ranger's leash, knowing the dog would stay close. They veered off the marked path, heading toward a steep slope littered with boulders and loose scree. Last winter's heavy rains had triggered several landslides in this area, but locals knew it was passable if you were careful. Ranger bounded ahead, his black and tan coat disappearing between massive granite chunks. The dog had completed canine training but failed the final certification. Too friendly for police work, the trainer had said. Still, his nose was exceptional. A sharp bark echoed off the rock face, then another, more insistent. Ranger, come. Riley scrambled over a fallen pine trunk. The barking continued. Almost frantic now. Riley found the dog pawing at a massive boulder split down the middle like a cracked egg. The fissure was maybe 2 feet wide at its center, narrowing to darkness below. Ranger's entire body was rigid, tail straight, the stance he'd been trained to take when detecting human scent. What is it, boy? Riley grabbed a stick and began clearing debris from around the crack. Probably just old camping gear, maybe some hiker's lost pack. But Ranger wouldn't budge, wouldn't stop that low, continuous whine. Riley pulled out their phone, activated the flashlight, and aimed it into the crevice. The beam caught something pale, almost white against the dark granite. Fabric, no bone. A human rib cage, partially covered by a faded blue jacket. Riley stumbled backward, heart hammering. Their hands shook as they dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? I'm on El Capitan, about a half-mile off the Mirror Lake Trail. My dog, we found human remains. 300 miles south in Fresno, Vera Wilder was reviewing invoices for her catering business when the doorbell rang. She glanced at the clock barely past 9 in the morning. Too early for deliveries. Through the peephole, she saw Sheriff Boyd Tanner standing on her porch, his weathered face grave beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Her stomach dropped. The sheriff didn't make house calls for good news. She opened the door. Boyd, morning, Vera. May I come in? She stepped aside, noting how he removed his hat, how his fingers worried at the brim. They'd known each other since high school. He'd been 2 years ahead of her. It's about Benjamin, isn't it? The words came out flat, resigned. After 3 years, she'd been expecting this visit, in a way. Boyd settled into her living room chair, looking uncomfortable. We found remains this morning, near El Capitan. A hiker's dog discovered them. In a boulder field. Vera sank onto the couch. Is it? We're not certain yet, but there was climbing gear with the body. The dental records will take a day or two, but... He paused, choosing his words carefully. The equipment matches what Miles Reeves was wearing when he disappeared. Miles, not Benjamin. Vera felt a confusing mix of relief and grief. Miles had been Benjamin's best friend since college, his constant climbing partner. They'd been inseparable, planning adventures, working seasonal jobs to fund their next expedition. Just Miles? She asked, so far. The area is unstable from recent landslides. We'll be conducting a thorough search, but I wanted to tell you personally before word got out. Vera nodded, her mind spinning back to that morning 3 years ago. Benjamin had stopped by to drop off his spare car keys, as always when he went climbing. He'd been excited about attempting a new route on El Capitan. Something about the perfect weather window. "We'll be back Sunday night," he'd promised, giving her that easy grin that made him look younger than 24. "Miles wants to try that new Thai place for dinner." But Sunday came and went, then Monday. By Tuesday, she'd called the Rangers. Search teams found their camp abandoned, sleeping bags still in the tent, food untouched. It was as if they'd simply vanished into the granite. Vera. Boyd's voice pulled her back. "I'd like you to come with me to the site. The investigators might have questions, and you could help identify any personal items." She grabbed her keys and jacket, muscle memory taking over. As they walked to his patrol car, Boyd continued, "The remains were found in an area that's been inaccessible since the slides. That's probably why the search teams missed it 3 years ago. The drive to Yosemite took 2 hours. Vera stared out the window, watching the Central Valley give way to rolling foothills, then towering pines. She'd made this drive so many times, dropping Benjamin off for climbs, picking him up sunburned and exhausted, but glowing with accomplishment. They parked at a ranger station, where Boyd transferred her to a park service vehicle better suited for the rough trails ahead. As they bumped along the dirt road, Vera could see El Capitan looming above the tree line, its sheer face catching the afternoon sun. The scene was larger than she'd expected. Yellow tape cordoned off a wide area of the boulder field. Several investigators in Park Service uniforms picked their way carefully through the rocks, photographing and marking evidence. A young ranger with a German shepherd stood to one side, looking shaken. Boyd led her to the command post, a pop-up tent where evidence bags were being cataloged. The lead investigator, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked up from her clipboard. "This is Vera Wilder," Boyd said, "Benjamin Wilder's sister." The investigator's expression softened. "I'm Lieutenant Chun. Thank you for coming. We've recovered several items that might help with identification." She led Vera to a table where clear evidence bags were laid out. A faded blue jacket torn at the shoulder, a climbing harness, the bright red webbing now dulled with dirt. A wallet, water-damaged but intact. Vera picked up the wallet bag, could make out the driver's license through the plastic. Miles Andrew Reeves. His photo grinned back at her, dark hair falling into his eyes the way it always did. "That's Miles," she confirmed, her voice steady despite the grief building in her chest. "These are all his things. He had that harness custom made in Denver." Lieutenant Chun nodded, making notes. "The remains are consistent with a fall, possibly triggered by a rock slide. We'll know more after the full examination." "What about Benjamin?" Vera asked. "Are you searching for him?" "We've got teams working the entire area. If he's here, we'll find him." Chun paused. "I know it's difficult, and you went through this countless times before, but is there anything you can tell us about their plans that day? Any specific routes they mentioned?" Vera closed her eyes, trying to remember. Benjamin kept a climbing journal. "It's at his apartment, my apartment now. I couldn't bring myself to clean it out." She'd paid his rent for 6 months before finally accepting he wasn't coming back, then moved his things into her spare room. "That would be helpful," Chun said. "Any information about their intended route could narrow our search." As they talked, Vera became aware of movement on the trail above them. A man on horseback was descending, followed by several cattle. Even from a distance, she could see he was an older man, sitting straight in the saddle with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime on horseback. The rider guided his horse carefully down the rocky trail, the cattle following in a loose line behind him. As he drew closer, Vera could see he was perhaps in his mid-50s, with the weathered skin of someone who worked outdoors and the solid build of a man who'd stayed active despite his years. He wore a tan Stetson and a work shirt rolled up to the elbows. Sheriff Tanner raised a hand in greeting. "Afternoon, Vernon." The man, Vernon, touched the brim of his hat and dismounted with practiced ease. His eyes swept over the scene, taking in the investigators, the evidence tent, and the cordoned area. "Boyd, heard the helicopters this morning." His voice was deep, tinged with concern. "Something serious?" "Afraid so. Hiker found human. Remains. Looks like one of those missing climbers from a few years back." Vernon's face creased with genuine sympathy. He removed his hat, revealing silver-streaked hair. The two young men. "I remember the search. Terrible thing." Boyd gestured to Vera. "This is Vera Wilder. Her brother Benjamin was one of them." Vernon stepped forward, extending a calloused hand. "Vernon Hartley. I own the ranch that borders this section of the park. I'm so sorry for what you're going through, Miss Wilder." His handshake was firm, his gray eyes direct. Up close, Vera could see the military bearing in his posture, the way he stood with his weight evenly distributed. "Thank you," she managed. Vernon turned back to Boyd. "This the same area we searched 3 years ago?" "Near enough. The landslides changed the terrain considerably." "That winter was brutal," Vernon agreed. He looked at the investigators working among the boulders. "My ranch hands move cattle through these trails regularly. Know every deer path and water source for miles. If you need extra eyes for the search, they're at your disposal." Lieutenant Chen had approached during the conversation. "We appreciate that, Mr. Hartley. Local knowledge would be valuable." Vernon nodded. "I've got 6 men working for me right now, all experienced in this terrain. They can cover ground your teams might miss." He paused, glancing at Vera. "Your brother Benjamin, was it? He was the blond young man." "Yes," Vera said, surprised by the specific description. "I remember seeing the search posters. Distinctive-looking fellow, very fit, outdoorsy type." "That's him." Vernon's expression grew thoughtful. "How old was he? 23, 24? 24 when he disappeared. Any family back home? Wife, children?" Sometimes young men that age, they get overwhelmed by responsibilities. The question felt odd to Vera, but she answered anyway. "No, nothing like that. Benjamin lived for climbing. He was single, no kids. So no reason to just walk away from his life," Vernon mused. "That rules out voluntary disappearance, I suppose." Boyd shifted his weight. "We investigated that angle thoroughly 3 years ago. These boys were experienced climbers, but not reckless. Something went wrong out here." Vernon settled his hat back on his head. "Well, I'll have my men keep their eyes open. We run cattle through the high country all season. If there's anything to find, we'll spot it." He looked directly at Vera. "Where was your brother from originally?" Sometimes knowing a person's background helps understand their choices in terrain. "We grew up in Fresno, but Benjamin spent every free moment in the mountains." "Athletic family? You climb as well?" "No, that was Benjamin's passion. I preferred my feet on solid ground." Vernon smiled, the expression warming his weathered features. "Smart woman. These mountains are beautiful, but they don't forgive mistakes." He gathered his horse's reins. "I'd best move these cattle before they scatter. Boyd, you have my number. Call if you need those extra searchers." "Appreciate it, Vernon." Vernon mounted his horse with the same easy grace he'd shown dismounting. "Miss Wilder, I hope you find your brother. No one should have to wonder what happened to family." He touched his hat brim again and clicked his tongue. The horse moved forward, the cattle following. Vera watched him navigate the narrow trail, noting how he guided the animals away from the investigation area without being asked. "Good man. Vernon Hartley," Boyd said once he was out of earshot. "Runs the biggest ranch in the county. 3,000 acres, borders the park for miles." Lieutenant Chun made a note. "Useful to have local support." Vernon's been here 40 years. Knows this land better than most rangers. Former military too, Army Corps of Engineers. If anyone can help find your brother, it's him. They spent another hour at the scene. Vera watched the investigators work, answered questions about Benjamin and Miles's climbing experience, their equipment preferences, their usual patterns. The sun was starting to sink behind El Capitan when Boyd suggested they head back. The drive home was quiet. Vera stared out at the darkening landscape, thinking about Miles's parents in Oregon. They have to be notified. After 3 years of not knowing, at least they'd have closure. Try to get some rest, Boyd said as he pulled into her driveway. We'll call as soon as we know more. And Vera, that climbing journal you mentioned, could be helpful. She nodded. I'll look for it tonight. Vera barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Miles's faded driver's license, Benjamin's empty tent. By dawn, she gave up and made coffee, sitting at her kitchen table as the first light crept across the valley. She needed to do something productive. The sheriff's department would want recent photos of Benjamin for the renewed search. She'd put together missing person flyers 3 years ago, but those had been hasty, desperate things printed at Kinko's. At midnight. This time she'd be thorough. Benjamin's room still smelled faintly of him, that mix of sunscreen, chalk dust, and the cedar sachets their mother had always tucked in drawers. Vera opened his desk, looking for the envelope of photos he'd shown her from their last trip to Joshua Tree. The desk was exactly as he'd left it. Pens scattered across the surface, a half-eaten protein bar still in its wrapper, receipts, and paperwork stuffed haphazardly in the drawers. Benjamin had never been organized about anything except climbing routes. She pulled out a manila folder labeled work stuff in Benjamin's scrawled handwriting. Inside were various pay stubs. From the odd jobs he'd taken, construction, warehouse work, seasonal retail during the holidays. He and Miles had perfected the art of working, just enough to fund their next adventure. 3 pay stubs caught her eye, paper clipped together. Hartley Ranch. She spread them on the desk, checking the dates. The most recent was dated September 15th, just 18 days before he disappeared. $1,200 for fence repair and general labor. Cash payment noted. 2 more stubs showed similar work in late August and early September. All cash payments, all signed with the same authoritative signature, Vernon Hartley. Vera sat back, journal entry and pay stubs side by side. Her brother had worked for Vernon Hartley for at least a month before disappearing. Vernon had stood there yesterday, shaking her hand, offering search assistance, asking all those questions about Benjamin, and never once mentioned he'd known him. Maybe he simply didn't remember. Vernon had said he employed 6 men currently. Over the years, dozens of seasonal workers must have passed through his ranch. 2 young climbers from 3 years ago might not stand out, but he'd remembered Benjamin was blond, remembered he was fit, outdoorsy. She found the photos she'd been looking for, and several more in boxes. Benjamin grinning at the summit of Half Dome. Benjamin and Miles at their campsite, headlamps creating halos in the dusk. A video on Benjamin's old phone showed them practicing. Moves on a boulder, Miles narrating with mock seriousness. Here we see the rare Benjamin wilder in his natural habitat. In every image, they looked vibrantly alive. Impossibly young. Vera selected the clearest ones and drove to the print shop, then headed to Yosemite Village. The climbing shop was busy with weekend warriors gearing up for day trips. The owner, Derek, recognized her immediately. He'd been part of the original search effort. Vera heard about the recovery. I'm so sorry. Thanks. They're still searching for Benjamin. She showed him the flyers she'd printed. Mind if I put one up? Of course. He cleared space on the community board. You know, I always wondered if they might have tried a different route that day. Benjamin was talking about the East Buttress when he came in for gear that week. Did he mention anything else? Anyone they were climbing with? Derek. shook his head. Just the two of them, as usual, though. He paused, thinking. Miles did ask about the approach from the valley floor versus coming in from the high country. Said something about a rancher showing them a shortcut through private land. A rancher? Yeah, they've been doing some work out that way, fence repair or something. The rancher told them about an old trail that would shave an hour off the approach. Vera's chest tightened. Did they say which ranch? No, but there's only a few big operations that border the park up there. Hartley's place is the largest. She thanked Derek and walked to the ranger station. The ranger on duty, a young woman named Kim, pulled up the original missing persons report on her computer. We interviewed everyone who'd seen them that week, Kim said, but there's no mention of them working in the area. We assumed they'd driven straight up from Fresno. They've been working at Hartley Ranch, Vera said. I found pay stubs, Kim frowned. That should have come up in the investigation. Vernon Hartley was part of the search coordination. He would have known if they'd been his employees. Maybe it slipped his mind. Maybe, Kim looked skeptical. Though Vernon's pretty sharp for his age, former military, very detail-oriented. He runs that ranch like a precision operation. Vera drove home with growing unease. It wasn't just the omission. People forgot things, especially after 3 years. It was the way Vernon had asked those questions, gathering information while seeming to offer sympathy. The specific interest in Benjamin's age, his relationship, status, his background. She thought about Benjamin's journal entry. Vernon seems like a decent boss. Present tense. Her brother had formed an opinion about Vernon Hartley, had worked for him multiple times, had taken his advice about trails, and Vernon had stood there yesterday, playing the helpful neighbor, acting as if he'd never seen Benjamin except on a missing poster. That night, Vera spread everything across her dining table. Pay stubs, journal, photos, her notes from the day. The facts were simple. Benjamin and Miles had worked for Vernon Hartley. Vernon hadn't mentioned this connection. He'd asked personal questions about Benjamin while claiming to only know him from search posters. It wasn't evidence of anything except a strange omission. But as Vera studied her brother's handwriting, she couldn't shake the feeling that Vernon Hartley knew more than he was saying. 3 days passed before Vera decided to visit Hartley Ranch. She'd spent those days helping coordinate the expanded search, watching teams comb the granite slopes where Miles had been found. No sign of Benjamin. Lieutenant Chun remained optimistic. The terrain was vast. The recent landslides had changed everything. It could take weeks to search properly. Maybe if she talked to Vernon directly, explained what she'd found, he might remember something helpful, some detail about Benjamin's state of mind. Conflicts with other workers, money troubles, anything that might explain what happened. That October day, the drive to Hartley Ranch took her through 20 miles of winding mountain roads. She'd looked up the property online, 3,000 acres of prime grazing land. Established in 1963, the photos showed pristine pastures, well-maintained outbuildings, and a classic ranch house with wraparound porches. Vernon had built something impressive out here. The entrance was marked by stone pillars and a metal arch, bearing the ranch's brand. Vera followed the gravel drive through pastures where cattle grazed in the morning sun. The main house sat on a rise, commanding views of the valley below and the mountains beyond. She parked near the front steps and climbed to the wide porch. The house was silent, no vehicles besides hers visible. She rang the doorbell, hearing it echo inside. Waited, rang again. No answer. Vera walked around to the back of the house. A second porch overlooked a fenced garden and what looked like an old bunkhouse, probably original to the property. Still, no sign of anyone. It was past 10 in the morning. Surely someone would be working. She returned to her car, considering her options. She'd driven all this way. It seemed foolish to leave without at least trying to find Vernon. He'd mentioned 6 ranch hands. Someone had to be around. Vera drove slowly down a dirt track that led deeper into the property. She passed equipment sheds, a large barn, what looked like a modernized stable complex. Everything was notably well maintained, painted, organized. Vernon clearly took pride in his operation. A narrower track branched off toward a cluster of older buildings. She followed it, figuring the hands might be working in a more remote section. The road curved through a stand of pines and opened into a clearing. That's when she saw Vernon's truck, a dark blue Ford F-35. She recognized from the investigation site. It was parked beside a low concrete structure built into a hillside. The building looked old, maybe from the 1950s or 60s, with thick walls. And a heavy metal door, some kind of storage facility, though more substantial than a typical root cellar. Fresh tire tracks marked the dirt around the truck. Someone had been here recently, probably this morning. Based on the crisp edges of the tread marks, Vera parked a respectful distance away and got out. "Mr. Hartley," she called. "It's—" Vera Wilder, no response. She walked closer, noting details. The structure had ventilation pipes protruding from the hillside above it, unusual for simple storage. The door was newer than the building, industrial grade, with multiple locks. A security camera was mounted on a pole nearby, its red light blinking steadily. "Hello," she called again. "Is anyone here?" The ranch was large. Vernon could be anywhere, but his truck was here, and those tire tracks were fresh. She walked around the structure, trying to determine its purpose. The concrete was thick, weathered but solid. Small windows set high in the walls had been covered with metal plates. It reminded her of military bunkers she'd seen in documentaries. A sound made her pause. She couldn't identify it, too muffled by the thick walls. Maybe machinery running inside a generator. Vera checked her phone. No signal out here, which wasn't surprising in the mountains. She'd wait a few more minutes, see if Vernon emerged. It felt awkward to be poking around his property, even if he had offered to help with the search. She returned to her car and leaned against it, studying the strange building. Why would a cattle ranch need such a fortified structure? Maybe it was from the property's earlier days, built for some purpose she couldn't guess. These old ranches often had interesting histories. The sound came again, slightly louder, definitely from inside the structure. Vera straightened, curious. Now it almost sounded like, but no, she was being imaginative. Too many sleepless nights, too much stress. She'd come here to ask Vernon about Benjamin, not to snoop around his property inventing mysteries. Vera walked back toward the structure, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. The sound came again, clearer this time. A voice, Vernon's. Distinctive deep tone, though she couldn't make out words through the concrete. She moved closer, careful to stay quiet on the gravel. Near the heavy door, she noticed a small ventilation grate at ground level. The voice was coming from there. Vera knelt beside it, straining to hear. "Told you about resisting." Vernon's voice, firm but not angry, almost patient, like someone dealing with a difficult animal. 3 years, and you still haven't. Learned. A sound that made Vera's blood run cold. Chains. The unmistakable rattle of metal links against concrete. "Please." A different voice, male, weak, and hoarse. I can't anymore." "You need to accept this as your life now," Vernon said, matter of fact. "Fighting only makes it harder on yourself." The chained person, because that's what they were, someone chained in this bunker, began to sob deep, hopeless sounds that spoke of prolonged despair. "Stop that." Vernon's tone sharpened. "Take your medicine, or no food again. You know the rules." "I'll take it. I'll take it." The sobbing quieted to whimpers. "Just please don't leave me here again." "That depends entirely on you." Footsteps inside, moving closer to the door. Vera scrambled backward, heart pounding. She half ran, half stumbled to her car, fumbling for her keys. The heavy door remained closed as she started the engine and drove away, trying not to speed, trying to look normal despite the shaking in her hands. She pulled over a mile from the ranch entrance, hands trembling as she found Sheriff Tanner's card and dialed his direct number. He answered on the third ring. "Boyd, it's Vera. I was just at Hartley Ranch. Vernon has someone locked in a building. I heard him. Heard chains." "Slow down, Vera. Where are you now?" She gave him her location, then explained what she'd heard. The concrete structure, Vernon's truck, the voices through the ventilation grate. Boyd listened without interrupting until she finished. "You're saying you heard Vernon talking to someone in a storage building?" "Not storage. It's like a bunker. And the person is chained, Boyd. I heard the chains. They were begging, Vera." His voice took on a careful tone, the one police used with hysterical witnesses. "You've been under incredible stress finding Miles, the renewed search. I know what I heard. I'm not saying you didn't hear something, but Vernon Hartley is a respected member of this community. He's donated hundreds of thousands to local causes. Hell, he funded the new search and rescue equipment last year. That doesn't mean what you're describing. It could be anything. Vernon's got an older brother with dementia. He cares for her. Sometimes dementia patients need to be restrained for their own safety. Or it could be a ranch hand sleeping off a bender. Vernon's been known to help guys dry out rather than fire them." A pause. "Without seeing an actual person being held against their will, I don't have probable cause to search private property. Vernon's got Fourth Amendment rights like anyone else. So, you're not going to do anything? I'll make some inquiries, discreet ones. But Vera, you need to be careful about making accusations. Vernon's got a lot of friends in this county, including the district attorney. Without concrete evidence, the implication was clear. Her word against Vernon Hartley's would go nowhere." "I understand," she said quietly. "Go home, get some rest, focus on the search for Benjamin. I promise I'll look into this, but it has to be done properly." After Boyd hung up, Vera sat in her car, watching the ranch entrance in her rearview mirror. No one followed. Vernon probably hadn't even seen her there. She drove home, Boyd's words echoing, without concrete evidence, probable cause. Vernon's standing in the community like armor against suspicion. But she knew what she'd heard. That night, Vera made a decision. She found Benjamin's old camping gear in the garage, including a trail camera he'd used to photograph wildlife. The camera was motion-activated, infrared-capable, designed to be strapped to a tree and left for days. If Boyd needed evidence, she'd get him evidence. She waited until 2 in the morning, dressed in dark clothes, and drove back toward Hartley Ranch. The moon was new, the darkness nearly complete. Good for staying hidden, harder for navigating. She'd learned the ranch's layout earlier that day. She could drive most of the way to the bunker with her headlights off, following the dirt tracks from memory. Vernon Hartley might be respected, might be rich, might have friends in high places. But someone in that bunker needed help. And until she knew it wasn't Benjamin, Vera couldn't walk away. Vera drove slowly with her headlights off, following the dirt track from memory. She'd parked well off the property initially, but realized she needed to get closer to place the camera effectively. The trail camera hung from her shoulder along. With straps to secure it to a tree, she'd tested it at home. The infrared sensors would capture anyone approaching the bunker door, day or night. She parked behind a cluster of pines about 100 yards from the bunker, far enough to remain hidden but close enough for a quick escape if needed. The clearing appeared as she crept forward, the bunker's concrete bulk a darker shadow against the hillside. Vernon's truck was gone. Good. She'd have time to find the perfect angle, somewhere the camera could see the door, but wouldn't be spotted easily. A large pine tree stood about 30 feet from the entrance. Vera circled it, finding a natural depression in the bark that would help conceal the camera. She was strapping it in place when her Flashlight beam caught something through the truck's rear window. She froze. The truck was back. When had it arrived? She'd been so focused on the tree, the camera placement, no engine sounds. Maybe Vernon had never left, just moved the truck earlier. Her heart hammered as she finished securing the camera, fingers clumsy with adrenaline. Almost done. Just needed to activate it and get out. Movement in her peripheral vision made her glance toward the truck. The cab light was on. Through the rear window, she could see items scattered on the seat. Magazines. Even from here, she could make out the covers. Fitness magazines featuring shirtless men. The kind her conservative father would have called those gay muscle magazines. His voice dripping disapproval. On the dashboard, a small bottle caught the streetlight. She recognized the shape. Poppers. Amy from college had shown her once at a party, explaining what they were for. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Vernon's specific interest in Benjamin's age, his looks, his relationship status. A closeted gay man in a conservative ranching community, wealthy enough to hide anything, isolated enough to couldn't leave well enough alone, could. You? Vera spun around. Vernon stood 10 feet away, having approached silently across the gravel. In the darkness, she could barely make out his features, but his stance was different from the helpful rancher at the investigation site. Predatory. Ready, she started, but he was already moving. His hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream, his other arm wrapping around her waist. He was stronger than his age suggested, muscles built by decades of ranch work. Vera bit down hard on his palm, tasting blood. Fuck! Vernon jerked his hand away. Vera twisted free and ran for her car, fumbling her phone from her pocket. Her fingers found 911 by muscle memory as she sprinted through the darkness. Behind her, Vernon's boots pounded on gravel. She reached her car, yanked the door open, fell inside, locked it just as Vernon reached the vehicle. The phone was ringing. Once, twice. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at Hartley Ranch on Mountain Road. Vera screamed as Vernon circled to the passenger side. Vernon Hartley is. The crowbar smashed through the driver's side window. Glass exploded across her lap, tiny cubes catching moonlight like diamonds. She dropped the phone, raising her arms to protect her face. Help! He's attacking me. Hartley Ranch. She kept screaming, hoping the dispatcher could hear. Vernon reached through the shattered window, fumbling for the lock. Vera grabbed the phone from the floor, holding it away from his grasp. Vernon Hartley is attacking me. Send help too. His hand found the lock, the door yanked open. He grabbed her hair, dragging her from the car. The phone flew from her hand, landing somewhere in the darkness, but she could hear the dispatcher's tiny voice. Ma'am! Ma'am, are you there? Units are responding. You'll see your brother real soon, Vernon growled, pinning her arms as she struggled. Should have stayed out of this. Should have grieved and moved on like everyone else. He produced zip ties from his pocket, of course, he had them. Ranchers always did, and bound her wrists behind her back with practiced efficiency. Then he lifted her like she weighed nothing and threw her into his truck bed. Vera's head hit the metal, stars exploding across her vision. She heard the truck door slam, the engine start. Gravel sprayed as Vernon accelerated toward the bunker. The ride was mercifully short. Vernon parked directly in front of the concrete structure, leaving the headlights on. He hauled her from the truck bed, her shoulders screaming as he dragged her toward the heavy door. Multiple locks clicked open. The door swung inward, revealing concrete steps descending into darkness. The smell hit her immediately. Unwashed human waste, the staleness of recycled air. Move, Vernon ordered, pushing her forward. Emergency. Lighting cast everything in a sick green glow. The stairs led to a larger space than she'd expected. The walls were lined with shelves holding canned goods, water bottles, medical supplies, a preparation for something. Nuclear war, societal collapse, the paranoia of an earlier era made manifest in concrete and steel. But it wasn't the supplies. That made Vera's knees buckle. In the far corner, a figure lay on a narrow cot, skeletal thin, hair grown long and matted, wearing stained sweatpants and nothing else. Chains ran from his ankle to a ring bolted into the floor. He didn't look. Up at their entrance, didn't react at all, Benjamin. The word came out as a whisper. The figure's head turned slightly. In the green emergency lighting, she could barely recognize her brother's features beneath the hollow cheeks and overgrown beard. His eyes were vacant, unfocused, the eyes of someone who'd learned that hope was dangerous. "Ben, it's me." "It's Vera." A flicker of something confusion, maybe recognition, passed across his face. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. One hand rose slightly, as if reaching for something he'd forgotten how to grasp, touching reunion. Vernon said, pulling another length of chain from a shelf. "Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to catch up." Vernon worked with methodical efficiency, looping the chain around a pipe that ran along the opposite wall from Benjamin. The shackle clicked around Vera's ankle with finality. She tested it immediately. Solid, no give at all. The chain allowed her maybe 6 feet of movement, enough to sit against the wall but not reach her brother. "Ben," she tried again. "Can you hear me?" Her brother's eyes tracked to her face, but the vacancy remained. His lips moved soundlessly. She could see the physical damage now, protruding ribs, muscles wasted away, scars on his wrists from long-healed struggles against restraints. Whatever spark had driven him to climb mountains, to chase adventure with boundless energy, had been systematically extinguished. "He can hear you," Vernon said, organizing supplies on a shelf. "He just doesn't talk much anymore." "Learned." "It doesn't help. You sick bastard." The words came out raw, primal. Vernon turned, his expression oddly calm. "I'm not the monster you think I am. I've taken care of him, fed him, kept him clean when he'd let me, made sure he had books, music. It's not my fault he chose to be difficult. You chained him in a bunker. I saved him." Vernon's voice took on an edge of conviction. "Do you know what happens to pretty boys like him out there? The world would have destroyed him eventually. Here, he's safe, protected." A distant sound made Vernon pause. Vehicles, multiple engines approaching fast. His face went still, as he processed what that meant. "You called them?" "Not a question. Before I grabbed you, they heard everything. Your name, the location, you attacking me." Vernon moved with sudden purpose, pulling a rifle from a wall mount Vera hadn't noticed. An AR-15 military style, the kind ranchers use for predator control. He checked the magazine with practiced movements. "Then we don't have much time. Vernon, think about this. It's over. Let us go. Cooperate. Maybe what? Maybe I'll only get 20 years instead of life. Maybe they'll put me in protective custody so the other inmates don't tear apart the rich old queer who likes young men." He laughed bitterly. "I've lived my whole life hiding. I'm not spending what's left of it in a cage." The sound of vehicles was louder now, surrounding the bunker. Vernon positioned himself between the siblings, rifle ready but not yet aimed. Through the ventilation system, Vera could hear muffled voices, radio chatter. How many were out there? "This is the sheriff's department." Boyd's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Vernon Hartley, we know you're in there. We know you have Vera and Benjamin Wilder. Come out with your hands visible." Vernon didn't respond. He stood perfectly still, calculating. Vera could see him working through options, exits, possibilities. The mind that had built a successful ranch, that had hidden his nature for decades, that had planned Benjamin's captivity down to the last detail. "They'll use gas," Vernon said finally, "or breach charges. Either way, it'll be violent, dangerous." He looked at Benjamin. He's too weak to handle that kind of stress. Then let us go. End this peacefully. It was never going to end peacefully. Vernon's finger moved to the trigger guard. Not since that friend of his walked into the bunkhouse. Miles, righteous little prick, threatening to call the police. As if Benjamin hadn't been willing at first, hadn't flirted back, hadn't taken my money gladly. Until you tried to, until I misread the situation. Vernon's jaw tightened. One moment of poor judgment, and that boy made it into something criminal. I had no choice. I killed him quick and clean, more than he deserved for trying to destroy my life. But Benjamin, his gaze softened slightly, looking at the skeletal figure on the cot. I couldn't hurt him. Even when he fought, when he tried to escape, when he went on hunger strikes, I loved him. That's not love. What would you know about it? Vernon's voice cracked. 40 years of hiding. 40 years of watching men I could never touch, never acknowledge, building this empire while dying inside. Then he showed up, beautiful, free, everything I could never be. Movement above, footsteps on the concrete roof. Vernon's rifle snapped upward. They're at the vents, he said. Military formation. Your sheriff called in SWAT. A bitter smile. At least they're taking me seriously. Vernon. Please, look at him. Vera gestured to Benjamin. Look what you've done. This isn't love. It's possession. Destruction. I kept him alive. Fed him. Bathed him. Held him when the nightmares came. That's more than. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, but in that moment of darkness, Vera heard the distinctive pop of breaching. Charges, not at the door. Above, the ventilation shaft. No! Vernon swung the rifle upward. The flashbang grenade dropped through the vent like a falling star. Vera had 1 second to squeeze her eyes shut and cover her ears before the world exploded in white light and devastating sound. Even prepared, the concussion hit her like a physical blow. Vernon fired blindly upward, the rifle's report adding to the chaos. Brass casings rang against concrete. Then bodies were pouring through the breach. Black tactical gear, weapons raised, moving with trained precision. Drop the weapon, drop it now. Vernon swung the rifle toward them. Multiple officers fired. Simultaneously, not bullets, Vera realized, but tasers. Vernon convulsed and collapsed, the rifle clattering across the floor. Clear, we have 3 civilians, 2 in restraints. Medics rushed in behind the tactical team. Someone was cutting her chain with bolt cutters, speaking to her. But Vera couldn't focus on anything except the medics surrounding Benjamin. They moved with urgent efficiency, checking vitals, starting IVs, preparing him for transport. Ma'am. Vera. A gentle hand on her shoulder. Lieutenant Chen. You're safe now, are you injured? I'm fine. Benjamin. My brother. They're taking good care of him. We need to get you checked out, too. He's been here 3 years, Vera said numbly. 3 years in chains, I know. We're going to get you both help. They led her up the concrete steps into a chaos of flashing lights, police. Vehicles, ambulances, even a medical helicopter waiting in the cleared area. Vernon was already in custody. Officers loading him into a patrol car. He looked smaller somehow, older, all his careful control stripped away. The flight to the trauma center was a blur. Vera held Benjamin's hand, so thin she could feel every bone, while medics worked around her. He hadn't spoken, hadn't responded to anything, but his fingers curled slightly around hers. I'm here, she whispered, not knowing if he could hear her over the helicopter's roar. You're safe. I'm taking you home. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Vera sat beside Benjamin's bed, watching him sleep. They'd been here 2 days now. The doctors said he was malnourished but stable. Dehydrated but improving. The physical damage would heal. The psychological damage was another matter. He hasn't spoken, Dr. Patricia Nguyen. The psychiatric specialist stood at the foot of the bed, reviewing Benjamin's chart. Not a word. He responds to simple commands, seems to recognize me sometimes, but Vera trailed off. It's called selective mutism, often seen in severe trauma cases. The fact that he's responding at all is encouraging. Recovery from this level of prolonged captivity takes time. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sheriff Tanner entered, hat in hand, followed by Lieutenant Chun. "How's he doing?" Boyd asked. "Physically improving," Vera said. "Has Vernon said anything?" Boyd and Chun exchanged glances. "That's why we're here. Vernon's been talking since yesterday. Full confession. We thought you should know what he told us." Vera steeled herself. "Tell me." Chun pulled out a small notebook. "Your brother and Miles finished working at the ranch in early September. They came back October 2nd to pick up some equipment they'd left behind. Vernon was drunk, made advances toward Benjamin in the bunkhouse. When Benjamin rejected him, Vernon became aggressive. That's when Miles walked in. He shot Miles point blank with a .38 revolver. Benjamin tried to run, but Vernon caught him, knocked him unconscious." Chun's voice remained professionally neutral, but Vera could see the disgust in her eyes. "He kept Benjamin sedated for 3 days while he dealt with Miles's body." "The rock slide," Vera said. Boyd nodded. "Vernon spent 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, specialized in demolition. He knew exactly where to place charges to trigger a slide that would look natural. Buried Miles's body in a crevice first, then used leftover military explosives he'd kept illegally. The slide was so precise, it took search teams 3 years and another natural landslide to expose that boulder. But why keep Benjamin?" Vera couldn't finish the sentence. "Vernon called it love," Chun said carefully. "Classic delusional possessive behavior. He'd been fantasizing about Benjamin since hiring him. In his mind, killing him would be wasteful. He believed Benjamin would eventually accept the situation." 3 years, Vera whispered. "The bomb shelter was built in 1962 by the previous ranch owner. Vernon modernized it over the years. Ventilation, plumbing, stockpiled supplies. He'd been planning for something like this, consciously or not," Dr. Nguyen interjected. "This level of preparation suggests long-standing paraphilic disorders. This wasn't his first victim." Chun nodded grimly. "Vernon admitted to 7 other sexual assaults over 15 years. All young men, early 20s, transients, or seasonal workers with no local connections. He'd drug them, assault them, then pay them to leave town. Most were too ashamed or afraid to report it. But he kept Benjamin. Benjamin was different, he said. Special. The others were just opportunities. Benjamin was the one he'd been waiting for." Chun closed her notebook. "Since the story broke, 3 men have already come forward. We expect more." Vera looked at her brother, trying to reconcile the vibrant climber with this hollow shell. "What happens to Vernon now?" "Murder 1 for Miles. Kidnapping. False imprisonment. Sexual assault. Attempted murder of a police officer he fired at SWAT, plus whatever charges come from the other victims. He'll never see freedom again." Boyd shifted uncomfortably. "Vera, I owe you an apology. When you called about hearing someone in that bunker, I should have listened. I let Vernon's reputation cloud my judgment. You couldn't have known. Maybe not, but I should have investigated. If you hadn't gone back with that camera." "She saved his life," Dr. Nguyen said quietly. "Another year, maybe less, and Benjamin's body would have shut down completely. The human mind can only endure so much." They talked a few more minutes about legal proceedings, victim services, the media attention that would inevitably come. Then Boyd and Chun left, promising to keep Vera updated. Dr. Nguyen lingered. "He'll need intensive therapy, possibly for years. The trauma of prolonged captivity, the loss of his friend, the sexual assaults, it's a lot to process. But people do recover. Not to who they were before, but to something new, something that can still be good. After she left, Vera sat in the quiet room, holding Benjamin's hand. His eyes were open now, staring at the ceiling. She thought of all the mountains he'd climbed, all the heights he'd conquered, and wondered if he'd ever trust the world enough to venture into it again. Miles, the word was so quiet, she almost missed it. Benjamin's first word in 3 years. Vera's throat closed. How did you tell someone their best friend died trying to save them? He's gone, Ben. I'm so sorry. Benjamin's eyes closed, a single tear tracking down his cheek, but his hand tightened. Around hers, holding on. It was a start,